Hey everybody, Low Quality here with a new kind of video. This time we're going to dive into how to make your own build, as well as kind of like looking at what tools that Blizzard has given the Barbarian class to work with. And then towards the end, kind of where I think they should change and improve the skills. So initially we're just going to start with basic skills, move on to core skills, and kind of progress down the normal tree layout. I've laid everything out in my own little fashion, and all, circled specific sections, group things into certain groups, and explain why. So to start, we have 4 basic skills. We have Frenzy, Bash, Lunging Strike, and Flay. I've grouped them up into sort of how I feel the playstyles work out, where basically we have Frenzy and Bash. These are super generic auto attack abilities. Bash stuns, and Frenzy has, some more beneficial support to it. It's very actually similar to Flay as well. So Flay, Bash, and Frenzy, these 3, all are very similar, right? So the playstyle is you just walk up and auto attack. There's no difference in the actual play, where the mechanics of them, they apply different debuffs, they do different things, but when you're actually using them, they're almost identical. Lunging Strike is the one standout here. So Lunging Strike has a gap closing component. You can use it if you're really slow. You can use it if you just want to have fun and kind of bounce around between mobs. It to me is the best, not from like a damage perspective or from like a support perspective ability for the basic skills, more just from a designed perspective. Like it's great in that it's unique. And doesn't fall into the same trap that these other 3 basic skills do. In the groups, Flay is basically mandatory for like a bleed build. It has a 10% more bleed damage rune on it, so you're always going to run it, I think, with the bleed builds. I don't know if you would ever run any of these other ones. Frenzy and Bash work really well with Upheaval, Hammer of the Ancients, and Double Swing. And then Lunging Strike can just kind of exist in its own realm. You can use it whenever you want to just kind of jump around and have fun. That basically does it for the basic skills, right? There's not a lot more to them. Some builds, you may even not want to use them, most specifically Whirlwind. So you can use basic skills to snapshot one of our aspects. You don't need to do that if you don't want to for Whirlwind. And if you just want to have like an extra slot open, you can just forego the basic skill entirely. But when it comes to these other core skills, most of the time you're going to want to at least have 1 generator. I've grouped the core skills into categories as well. So you have Whirlwind, that kind of stands out on its own. It's a very unique playstyle. It's a channeled ability, and you can walk through enemies. It's super clean, super easy to play. That's why everybody loves it. You have this bleed playstyle, so this is Rend. It's in its own little category because although it plays very similar to Upheaval, Hammer of the Ancients, and Double Swing, in that you just walk up to a pack, use Rend a bunch, and apply your damage, that damage is delayed. So you're not going to instantly blow shit up. You're going to apply a massive bleed, and then proc that bleed with something like Rupture. The final 3 core skills are these 3: Upheaval, Hammer, the Ancients, and Double Swing. Basically, they have the exact same playstyle. You walk up, you use them to try to like one-shot or do as much damage as possible to a stunned or a CC'd enemy. But again, mostly they feel the same. Upheaval is a little more unique in that it has massive AoE to it, but Hammer of the Ancients you can get pretty big AoE on, and Double Swing is the more single-target focused ability. But when it comes to how you play the game, they're almost identical, to me at least, right? You just run up, use your ability, try to kill. 2 of the key passives for the Barbarian that I want to highlight here are Unbridled Rage and Gushing Wounds. So Gushing Wounds, basically, this is a combo that, you can't really... I mean, I don't even know if you would go Gushing Wounds. So basically, it only affects bleed, and what you might not see immediately is that Unbridled Rage also just works with Rend. So if you go Gushing Wounds, you're missing out on a 135% increased damage on Rend. So Gushing Wounds might not even be worth it. but it is definitely not worth it in any other build. So if you're going bleed builds, it's the only time you might use Gushing Wounds. Unbridled Rage works with everything, right? So it is basically hands down just this disgusting key passive that if you want to use it to make your core skills do more damage, it basically stands alone. And I feel like long term they're going to want to change it. I don't know if they're going to want to nerf it. I would rather they buff the alternative key passives, but that's where it stands. We'll get to the others further down. After we've gone through the basic skills and the core skills, we're left with defensive skills as well as, I think, brawling skills. Those are the next two sort of categories. I've laid them out like this because I want to talk about them in very specific ways. Challenging Shout is actually one of the only skills that gives you damage reduction, right? The other two skills are actually basic attacks. So Frenzy gives you damage reduction if you take one of the nodes, and Flay does as well. But these are the only three abilities / skills that in the entire Barb arsenal you actually get damage reduction from, like the active skills that you use. But I said there were defensives here, right? So where are the other defensives? These three are technically defensive abilities, but they don't give you any damage reduction. They don't give you armor. They don't give you resistance. The only one that is sort of in that realm is Iron Skin, which gives you a barrier as well as a bit of a heal. But when you're looking at, I'm trying to build a character out and I want him to be tanky and I want that character to have damage reduction, you're almost always going to put Challenging Shout in. It's almost always going to be in the build, basically required, probably not healthy long term. Rallying Cry is in its own category as well, because Rallying Cry is actually one of the sources of Unstoppable for the Barb. And because of how certain legendary aspects work, you can almost make this permanent. So Rallying Cry becomes this sort of unstoppable, permanent buff, which again is almost, it's standalone, right? There's nothing else that really gets you there. The only other options for Unstoppable are Charge, which works pretty well in PvP, and then Wrath of the Berserker, which is a 60-second cooldown base, right? So really, when it comes to reliability for Unstoppable, Rallying Cry is in its own little world, and you're really going to want to just use that if you're pushing higher, not Greater Rift, Nightmare Dungeon content, right? So these two are kind of standalones in their own little universe. I think that should change. I think Blizzard should take a look at the other defensives as well as Kick here and give them benefits similar to Rallying Cry or Challenging Shout. Currently, Iron Skin has an affix, a legendary affix that you can use that gives you damage reduction. It doesn't make sense to me why you would ever use that if you could, otherwise just use Challenging Shout and take back that legendary affix. So I feel like some amount of damage reduction should probably be applied to Iron Skin if they are going to make damage reduction as important as it is. I think Ground Stomp, you could also just have like anytime you Ground Stomp for 5 seconds afterwards, you have damage reduction, which would make you try to get the cooldown as low as possible and constantly be Ground Stomping. I think that'd be fun. Kick is in its own little universe where it's a brawling skill, but it feels way more like Ground Stomp than anything else. So maybe you could move Kick to defensive and make it some like any enemy you kick or something you take reduced damage from. I don't know, or anybody hit by the enemy you kick, stuff like that. If we move further down to the actual brawling skills, again, I don't know why Warcry is a brawling skill. It just buffs your damage. This one feels bad to not include in your builds, but it's mostly whenever I'm trying to cut a Warcry or a Battle Shout. Warcry is normally the one I cut, just because all it does is really give you more damage. Gives you, I think, Berserking as well, or Berserk. So if you don't have a source of Berserk, it's kind of hard to cut this out. But it's, to me, the lesser evil, right? Challenging Shout is insane damage reduction. Rallying Cry is unstoppable. Warcry is Berserk and damage. So, you can cut Warcry if you're trying to be more experimental with your builds. Which also then leads us to Veteran Brawler's aspect. So we have Leap and Charge here, and these are our two movement skill abilities. Most of the time, you'll swap them in as like the 6th skill if you want to just move really quickly. But there is an alternative, and that's Veteran Brawler's Aspect. So this kind of opens up a build concept, which is, oh, I want to do damage with a skill that isn't a core skill. Can I make it work with Veteran Brawler's Aspect? And the answer is kind of probably not. As well as it has core skill in the description. So each time a core skill deals direct damage to an enemy, your next charge or leap deals increased damage. If you put this on a two-hander, it's up to 600% increased damage, which is crazy. The only issue is that if you're trying to design a build that doesn't use core skills for damage, but it requires you to deal damage with a core skill, I feel like that defeats the purpose of allowing, people to make builds that aren't just using these 5 abilities, right? It doesn't make sense to me why you need a core skill here, right? I feel like each time a skill deals damage will be totally fine, and you could just kind of mess around, right? I don't know. Another thing here that is kind of annoying is that it's charge or leap, right? So this idea of, I'm going to go a brawl build, right? I'm going to take leap and charge. It kind of doesn't work if you're just trying to scale 1 and your pants have +3 to leap on them, right? And you're just like, okay, I'm just going to leap. Most of my damage is going to come from leap. I can reset leap's cooldown. Sounds great. But I also want to use charge to like go through the brawler fantasy. Well, whenever you charge, it's going to eat up the charges of your Veteran Brawler's Aspect. So it's kind of anti-synergistic. I don't really know how you fix that. You could just make this leap, right? And then leave charge as, the standalone ability that it is, and leave leap as the main damage dealer for the brawler build. I don't know. Either way, just strange to me, how they are attempting to give you an alternative to core skills, but require a core skill to proc it, and then anti-synergistic to use both. Just strange. If we move further down, we come to one of the weirdest abilities, to me at least, which is Steel Grasp. It has a unique tied to it, and that unique doesn't really make it it doesn't really change how it's used. It just makes it easier to throw your Steel Grasp out. But the weird part to me about this ability is that it's a weapon mastery skill, but it doesn't use a weapon in your arsenal. So if you're trying to go like a weapon swap build, like Walking Arsenal, where you need to deal direct damage with a certain type of ability, the weapon mastery skill, Steel Grasp, doesn't proc any of it, right? And I don't know why it's a weapon mastery skill if it doesn't use a weapon. Like I just don't understand some of thematically the choices they made, but also like functionally, like why can't I just associate a weapon with this and then we just get the benefit of like swapping weapons with it? I don't know. But mostly it's like a support skill, right? So you can plug this into any any build you want to make. It applies vulnerable. It gives you berserk. It's pretty good overall. Just really strange that it's a weapon mastery skill. And then we have the final sort of alternative option to core damage, which is Deathblow. And the reason why I highlight this with Encroaching Wrath is because it is the only weapon mastery skill where you would ever want to use Encroaching Wrath with. And I say that because the Steel Grasp base damage is super low, and then the Rupture base damage as well is like 10%. Encroaching Wrath does not increase the bleed damage of Rupture. If it did, it would be broken. And then for Steel Grasp, because it starts out so low, and you really have to pump the ranks of the skill up, like maybe there's a build out there where it works. I kind of want to theorycraft it now after seeing this. I just don't know if I have an ancestral high rolled version of the axe yet for the Steel Grasp unique, but really this only works with Deathblow, and it works pretty well. I put out a video recently showing off Deathblow with Encroaching Wrath. It does honestly comparable damage to something like a Hammer of the Ancients without the Quake, and then probably similar to like an Upheaval. The only issue is that you can't really use Deathblow unless you're killing stuff. So you the playstyle is you get small like normal mobs next to elites and then use it to kill the normal mobs while damaging the elites. and move on from there. But yeah, when we're looking at alternatives to core skills for your builds, these are the two that stand out, with potential for Steel Grasp. I don't know. I honestly don't highlight one of the actual viable build options, and I'm not going to do it today, but it's basically thorns. So thorns exist. It is an alternative to core skills technically, but I won't get into that too much. When we get down to the bottom, we're going to take a look at the ults. We have Wrath of the Berserker, which is just a buff. We have Iron Maelstrom, which to me seems like it should have been something that you could build make a functioning build around, but this is very hard to pull off. And then you have Call of the Ancients, which is kind of like a mix between a buff as well as a damage dealing ability, right? Very, very strange that none of these ultimates actually give you any defensive measures. You can't pick one of these that's going to be more defensive. All of these are offensive. Iron Maelstrom gives you a stun. Call of the Ancients gives you some stun as well as maybe some mobs that'll like distract. And Wrath of the Berserker doesn't give you any defenses at all. I'm not really sure why there's so little defensive options or defensive choices to make as a barbarian. But at the bottom, we also have our two final key passives. So I would consider this to be one of the combos that you can pull off when you're trying to design a build, which is Wrath of the Berserker in Unconstrained. So the key is that Wrath of the Berserker has a potential exponential damage bonus, and it's made a little bit easier from Unconstrained. At the same time, Wrath of the Berserker works really well with Unbridled Rage, because the exponential multiplier is based on how much fury you spend. So if you go Unbridled with Wrath, you're basically spending more fury and therefore proccing the damage multiplier a bit more. If you're using Unconstrained, it starts higher, but you're spending less fury, so it goes exponential a little bit slower. Wrath of the Berserker lasts 10 seconds, so you have a 10-second window to spend as much fury as possible, which will eventually lead to this kind of exponential scaling. So if you can really make a build here that spends as much fury as fast as possible, I think it's best for something like a boss killer. I don't know if you could just, because the cooldown on Wrath is 60 seconds base and you can get it down to like 45, I wouldn't really enjoy having a build that was entirely designed around doing damage with this, but I think there's definitely some potential here. It should be pretty fun. The final one is Walking Arsenal. And Walking Arsenal and Iron Maelstrom is kind of like a no-brainer. Basically, anytime you deal... I cut it off, actually. Anytime you deal damage with one of your abilities, it increases your damage done by 10%, based on like the weapon you used. If you use all three, you get another 15% multiplier on it. If you use Iron Maelstrom, it immediately procs this, and then you can take advantage of this damage bonus moving forward. Both of these passives actually increase your damage unconditionally, right? So it doesn't matter if you're using a core skill, like this one does. Unbridled Rage requires a core skill, which means that core skills are just so much stronger than everything else because of it. These two down here don't require, there's nothing to it. You get an unconditional amount of damage, so you're definitely going to go one of these two if you're picking a leap or charge build or a deathblow build, right? Because technically, Unbridled Rage does nothing for these two skills. Same as Call of the Ancients. If you're trying to scale Call of the Ancients, which, again, probably impossible, but I don't know, it's more of like a support thing, you'd be wanting to use one of these two, right? So that kind of does it, right? That kind of wraps up every single skill here. There are a lot of passives in between. There are a lot of legendary affixes I haven't brought up. And I have them, but I don't want to really overload anybody for this first video. I'm just going to kind of put this out, see what you guys think. And, give me comments on how you feel the Barb class is currently, because I feel like there's a lot to improve on. Specifically around Unbridled Rage. So this, in combination with some of the legendary affixes that require core skills, as well as some of the glyphs that require core skills, I don't understand why they're core skills specific. when if you just made them generic damage, I feel like it would open up way more build opportunities. So from a damage perspective, I think, yeah, that's at the heart of the issue for me. Core skills are just too good. From a defense perspective, I feel like these three are undertuned. I feel like Rallying Cry is a problem with Unstoppable. We need alternatives to Unstoppable, and if you don't want permanent Unstoppable, like that might be an issue. Unsure really on that. I think we could have some defensive portion to any of these abilities. So if you're looking at trying to up your defenses, I think we could give one of our ults some defenses as well. And you could do this by changing the skill itself or just by giving us more affixes. I don't really know. I don't really care. And then obviously the shouts, right? Like the shouts have their own sort of unique place to the barb right now where they are just super strong. I think we need to tune them in some way. I don't know if we want to just take parts of, you know, like maybe instead of picking both Challenging Shout and Rallying Cry, you split the difference. And one of them gives Unstoppable, while the other one gives damage reduction should be on both maybe, but like somehow making Challenging Shout more unique is what I would say. Like trying to only make it so that Challenging Shout is taken on every barb that's going to be pushing damage reduction, I don't like it. So yeah, that's going to do it for this video. In the future, I might make a video where we take a look at each of these skills as well as the legendary affixes that kind of affect them, and maybe rewrite how I think those aspects should be, you know, designed. I'm not really sure. It'll be based on how well this video does. So if you like it, thumbs up, hit me with a subscribe, a comment, something like that. Otherwise, yeah, I'm going to keep trying to make builds. The one reason why I think Iron Maelstrom is struggling so much is because it doesn't have this Unbridled Rage multiplier on it, as well as the basic skills. I don't know why there's so much increased basic skill damage, because it just doesn't matter. If it was a multiplier, if the basic skill damage on your weapons was a multiplier, or if the ultimate damage on weapons from gems was a multiplier, I feel like maybe these could be, you know, potential builds that would work, that would function well. So that's, you know, I just have a lot of thoughts, right? And you might have to tune down the damage since it's going to be a multiplier as opposed to additive, but I think it would really open up the distinct kind of builds that you have as a barb. Whereas honestly, I only see, and I'll number them right now. I think maybe these three, in my opinion, are like the main different types of barb builds that you have right now, right? The bleed build is pretty similar to this one. You just spam your keys a lot more. And then none of these, like maybe this is its own unique builds, which I haven't really put to the test because I can't function, like there's no world in which you need 10 seconds to kill an elite, and yet you can also survive those 10 seconds. If you're in a nightmare dungeon where they have that much health and damage reduction, you're going to die if you stand in one spot for 10 seconds. So this exponential kind of Wrath of the Berserker combo, I could see it working in group play. I just don't know why there are builds locked behind group play. I think most of these builds should function by themselves. But yeah, I think the Deathblow build is very similar to this build as well. So like really the barb has like 3 unique playstyles, and I kind of want to open that up more. And I'm, you know, I think they will, but we'll see. We'll see if they bring some unique aspects in season 1. I'd be happy. I really think Iron Maelstrom should have its own unique that isn't a pair of boots that does nothing, right? Like I feel like it should have had a weapon unique, and that weapon would make it do more damage. I don't know. There's themes here where it would just be kick-ass to see. We're, you know, this is the first version. This is season 0. We're gonna get season 1 pretty soon here. I'm really happy with how the tree works. I've had to make a bunch of decisions over the time of like leveling to leveling in the campaign, into leveling in World Tier 3, into sort of this mid game, into the end game, speed farming in PvP. You have a lot of choices. I just feel like we could, improve on those choices. So yeah, thanks again for watching. I will catch you guys in the next one.